I'll do one of the more difficult problems. So let's do number 50. And it's only difficult because it's longer. So 10 plus 90n plus 2n, because I distributed, equals 10 minus 35n plus 3n, because I distributed. So now I'm going to combine like terms. I get 10 plus 92n equals 10 minus 32n. I'm going to leave my letters on one side, numbers on the other. So I'm going to add 32n on both sides. So I get 10 plus 124n equals 10, because those canceled. Then I'm going to leave the denominator, I'm going to subtract 10 from both sides. And so 124n equals 0. When I divide, I actually get, 0. N equals 0. So not too difficult, just a little bit longer than the rest. Okay, moving on to numbers 51, 53, and 55. They are absolute value problems, and they are equations. So just make sure that the absolute value is by itself before you split your equation. So I'm going to start with 51. It is by itself already, so my first one is going to stay the same. And my second equation is going to equal a -3. So now I just solve. So in this case, m would equal 18, or m would equal -18. And be careful, because a lot of people will look at problems and go, oh, well, it's either 18 and -18. And they'll do another problem and say, oh, well, it's 5 and -5. So just make sure you are doing two separate equations so that you don't mess up. And I'll show you with 53 right now. So it is not alone yet. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Multiply both sides by 2. So b minus 3 equals 8. And now I get to split my equation. So my first equation will be b minus 3 equals 8. Or my next equation would be b minus 3 equals -8. And so I'm going to add 3 to both sides and add 3 to both sides. And so my b here equals 11. And then my b here equals -5. And those would be my two answers. Okay, last but not least, let's do number 55. So again, the absolute value is not by itself. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. It's not being multiplied unless it looks like 56 right here, where the -10 is multiplying itself by the absolute value. Then you know it's addition or subtraction. So back to 55. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get 1 minus 3x, and absolute value equals 26. So my first equation is going to stay the same. And my second equation is going to switch to a -26. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. So I get -3x equals 25. And I'm going to use a calculator to know 25 divided by, right? Yes, I did. 25 divided by -3 equals -8 1/3. Or you could have said -25/3. That's totally fine. And then my second equation, so I'm going to box this answer. And my second equation, I subtract 1 from both sides, so -3x equals -27. So x equals +9. Okay, so we've now reached the section where we have word problems. Yay! Okay, so if you haven't looked at the notes, make sure you look at the last couple of pages on my notes, because there are a few charts and it will help you. So I'm going to do a few. We're going to start off with my mixture problem. So I'm going to start with number 57. So I'm going to start my chart with an A and a B, and I'm going to draw my chart and have my percent, my amount, and my percent, and my amount of solution. Okay, so I'm going to read. It says 12 milliliters of a 65 saline solution. So the first one is 65%, and it's 12 milliliters. So I'm going to input that into my problem. And then it says was mixed with an 8 milliliter pure water. Okay, so it's an 8 milliliter of pure water. So pure water is 100 milliliters. Okay, so now I just need to use my calculator and multiply those two things out, because my amount times my percent is going to equal my amount of solution. So 12 times 65 is 780, and 8 times 100 is 800. So now my last step would be to do my total column. And I'm going to do that in black so you can still see. So underneath right here, there should be a third column here that says total and a box, right? So what's the amount of the total? Well, if I'm adding 12 milliliters of something and 8 milliliters of something else, my total is going to be 20 milliliters. But we don't know the percent of the solution that it's going to be. So when I multiply those two out, my actual answer would be 20x. So now we just have to make one equation. So 780 plus 800 is going to equal my 20x. And so 780 plus 800 is 580 equals 20x. And so x would equal 79. And this would actually be my answer, because what they were asking for is what is the concentration of the mixture? Well, looking at the mixture, which is my total, the concentration is my percent, and that was x. And so my answer is 79% of concentration for that mixture. Okay, so let's do one more. Let's do 60. Whoops. Let me change that. Okay, so let's do 60. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my chart, and I'm going to draw my chart with 3 columns. My amount times my percent equals my amount of solution. Okay, so I have my top, my bottom, and my total. So in this case, Shreya and her brother mixed together 2 types of soil to make 5 meters cubed of soil. So how much of something, right? So how much we're mixing soil. So my total is 5. My total is actually 5. Okay, and then it says of soil with a 26% clay content. So I know that 26 is my percent of the content. Okay, it says they used 2 meters of one. So let's say this is my 2 meters cubed, right, of a soil with 50%, right? And then it says, and 3 meters cubed of another type of soil. So they use this much of another type of soil. But we don't know what the percent of clay content was in there. So I'm going to put X. So now we're able to do my equation. So 2 times, well, not yet, because 2 times 50 is 100. And 3 times x is 3x. And I'm going to use my calculator for 26 times 5. So I get 130. Okay, so then you have 100 plus 3x equals 130. And I'm going to subtract the 100 from both sides. So I get 3x equals 30. So x equals 10. 10 would be the percent of the 3 meters cubed type of soil. And so let's go back to the question. It says, what was the clay content of the second type of soil? So I don't have to do anything else, and that is my answer. So hopefully now you're able to do a little bit more of these mixture problems. Let's move on to the next type of word problems. Actually, let's do one more. 62 is a little bit confusing because we're not actually looking for a percent of solution. In this case, we're actually looking for how much something costs. So I'm going to draw a chart again. So I'm going to have my amount times my money is going to equal my total, right, essentially. And and so then I'm going to write soy, and then I'm also going to write my total, and I'm going to write my canola. Okay, so my vegetable oil costs 96 pounds, is made by combining soybean oil and, okay, blah, 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 etc., etc. Okay, so the $96 or 96 cents a pound is actually for our total. So I'm going to put 96 cents here for my total. And we also know that the total number of pounds of vegetable oil is 16. And that's really all we know for our total. We also know that canola is 90 cents a pound, and we know that soybean is $1.10 a pound, or $1.10. Okay, so this is all I know. I can multiply 16 and 96. So I'm going to do that first, which is 1,536. So 1,536 is my total. I don't know how much of my soybean oil or my canola oil. So I'm going to pick soybean to be X. And then whatever amount that is, I'm going to subtract that from 16. And so I know that 16 minus X would give me my canola. So I'm going to fill out my chart, and 90 times 16 equals 1440 minus 90X. Oh, and I just realized I made a mistake here. So at the very top, if you take a look, oops, let's make that a little bit smaller. So if you take a look right here, I should have added that X. So let's add that X right now. Okay, so now I have enough information to start writing my equation. So I have 110x plus 1440 minus 90x equals 1536. I can now combine like terms. So 110 minus 90x is 20x plus 1440 equals 1536. And 1536 minus 1440 is actually 96. So divide by 20, you get 4.8. So x equals 4.8. And since X is actually our soybean oil, and they're asking us for both, I know that soybean oil is 4.8 pounds, and my canola oil would be 16 minus that, which is going to be 11.2 pounds. And I'm done. Okay, so let's move on to the next type of word problems. So the next type of word problems is actually distance problems, okay? It's very similar. Again, check your notes that I did. But the main idea is rate times time equals distance. And hopefully you've remembered this from 7th grade or last year or even now that you're here. So it says, Totsakan left Bill's house and traveled toward the lake. Heather left 3 hours later. Okay, so I'm going to put a T for Totsakan and an H for Heather. Okay, and we actually don't need this bottom one in this case. Sorry, I just get into the habit. Okay, so Totsukan, we don't know his rate after reading that. We know Heather left 3 hours later. So if Heather left 3 hours later, who's been traveling longer? Totsukan's been traveling longer, right? So whatever Heather timed she did, then we know that Bill is going to be later. Because it says, the last sentence says, after traveling for 2 hours, Heather caught up. So how much time did it take Heather? We know that it took Heather 2 hours. And Totsukan was 3 hours later, so we know it took him 5 hours. Because Heather left 3 hours later and she only traveled for 2 hours, so that's what we did. Then the last information we know is that Heather traveled for 60 miles an hour. So now I can actually multiply 5 times x is 5x, and 60 times 2 is 120. Okay, so now we know these two pieces of information, and we need to actually read, were they traveling in opposite directions? Were they traveling in the same direction? So I'm going to draw a picture, and it says, this is Bill's house. And so here's Totsukan is going this way, right? And then Heather is going the other way. And eventually they meet at the same spot. So is the distance going to be the same? Did they travel the same distance? And the answer is yes. And if they traveled the same distance, then these two distances that we did in our chart are going to be equal to each other. So 5x equals 120. I'm going to divide by 5x, by 5, divide by 5. So x actually equals 24. Then go back to the question. The question said, what was Totsukan's average speed? Is x actually Totsukan's speed? It is, so 24 miles per hour would be your answer. Okay, so let's do one that is actually in opposite directions. So it says an aircraft carrier, then we'll do 68. So an aircraft carrier and a container ship left Diego Garcia at the same time. Ships traveled in opposite directions, so that's important information. The container ship traveled 3.2 kilometers an hour faster than the aircraft carrier. So just like before, we're going to start with our chart. So I'm going to start with my chart. I'm going to have rate times time equals distance, and I'm going to have an aircraft carrier and a container ship. And so we know that the container ship traveled 3.2 kilometers faster. So we don't know what the aircraft is, but we do know that the container did 3.2. So it was faster, so it's more. So x plus 3.2. It says after 1 hour, they were 43.2 kilometers apart. So they both traveled essentially for 1 hour. So now I can multiply across. So I get 1x, and I get x plus 3.2. So let me draw a picture of what this looks like, right? So I have a ship that goes this way, right? And then the other ship that goes that way. And so from here to here is the distance 43.2. So I'm not going to set them equal to each other because we don't know if one went faster. Well, actually, we know one went faster than the other. But I can add them together. So I'm going to do x plus 3.2 equals 43.2. Oh my gosh, easy problem. So 2x plus 3.2 equals 43.2. And so 2x equals 40 when I subtract. And so x equals 20. And so my question, I'm going to go back. It says find the aircraft carrier speed. Well, x is my aircraft carrier speed, and x equals 20. So my answer is 20 kilometers an hour. And you're done. The last and final type of word problems you're going to have in this worksheet is work rate problems. Okay, so again, you can look at your notes or my notes online, but it also has to do with a chart. And so I am going to have my rate times my time is going to equal part of the job. So I'm going to draw my chart right here. Okay, so we'll start with 72. So 72 says it takes Shayna 16 hours to tar a roof, and Anjali can tar the same roof in 15 hours. So I'm going to put an S here and an A for their names, and my rate for Shayna is 1/16, and my rate for Anjali is 1/15. And it says find how long it will take them if they worked together. So I don't know my time. I'm going to put T here and T here. So I have 1/16T and 1/15T. So now I can write my equation. So 1/15T plus 1/16T equals 1 job, because together they will complete 1 job. So now if I have the same common denominator, I'm actually going to just multiply 15 and 16. So I know the top is going to be 16 over something, and then the bottom is going to be something, and this will be 15 over something. And I'm going to multiply 15 and 16 to see what I get. So when I do that, 15 times 16 is 240, and that is my denominator. And so now I can say it's equal to 240 over 240, because 240 over 240 would be the same thing as 1. Okay, so now I can cancel the denominator by multiplying the whole thing by 240. So I'm going to get 16t plus 15t equals 240. And when I add 16 plus 15, I get 31t equals 240. And when I divide that by 31, I get roughly t equals 7.74 hours. And this would be my answer. Now, if I really wanted to know how much that is in time, right, I'm going to draw an arrow. So I have 7.74 hours, right? So really what you would want to do is, well, I know this is going to be 7 hours, right? But I want to know how many minutes that is. So I'm actually going to take the 0.74, and I'm going to multiply that by 60 minutes so that I know how much or how many minutes is 0.74 of an hour, which is about 44.4 or about 45, so 44 minutes roughly. And you don't have to answer in both of these, but I know the SAT likes asking questions as far as how many minutes, right? Like 7 hours and 44 minutes rather than 7.74 hours. We don't go around, saying, oh, it's going to take me, we could say 3.5 hours, but we don't say, oh, it's like 3 and 0.23 hours to make a sandwich, or 3 hours and 0.25 to drive my car somewhere or something like that. So in that case, this would be how you can answer and figure out how many minutes. Okay, so the next couple of problems you are solving for a variable. We've done this in class before. Hopefully you don't have too many issues solving for this. So I'm going to start with 78. I want A to be isolated. B is on the denominator, so going PEMDAS backwards. You're really doing PEMDAS backwards. Okay, so there's no subtraction, there's no addition, there is a division. So I'm going to multiply both sides by B. So I get BG equals AC. And now in order to isolate my A, I need to divide by C. So my answer is A equals BG over C. Okay, so I'm actually going to do number 76 down over here. So Z equals -5 over 2x. Again, we're isolating for x. And it is on the denominator, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 2x. So I get 2xz equals -5. This cancels and that cancels. Okay, and in order to get x alone, so I'm going to divide by the two numbers or the two terms that I do not want. So I'm going to get rid of the 2 and the z, and I'm going to divide by 2z. And so now my answer is actually x equals -5 over 2z. Now there's a different way you could have actually solved this. I'm going to do it again. So z equals negative 5 over 2x. And this is actually over 1. Anytime you have two fractions, you can actually cross multiply. So I get negative 5 equals 2xz. And now I'm back to the same spot, so I'm going to divide by 2z, divide by 2z, and I still get the same answer. Negative 5 over 2z equals x. And that's it. Okay, so the next section here is graphing inequalities. The only rule you really have to remember is when you multiply or divide by a negative, the sign or the inequality sign actually switches. So I'm going to be talking about, let's say, number 83. And so 1 is less than or equal to negative m. I don't want to know what negative m is equal to or greater than or whatnot. So I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1. And because the rule is when you multiply or divide by a negative, then the inequality sign switches. So in this case I divided, so now I have m left over, my inequality sign switches, and I have negative 1. Now if you don't like the variable on the right side, and most teachers do not, most SAT and tests in general have the letter on the left side, so we're just going to rewrite it. It is pointing towards the m, so I'm going to keep the inequality pointing to the m, and then I have my answer. So greater than or equal to negative 1, because there is a line underneath that is greater than or equal to, my circle is going to be closed, and I'll make it green. Actually, I'll do orange. So it's going to be closed circle at negative 1, and then it's less than, so I'm going to go less, where my numbers go less.